Okay, so an important part of project management is procurement. And that is finding the resources necessary to deliver both the management and the event, because you've got to remember you're going to have to need resources to actually manage, plan and implement that plan leading up to the event itself. And a large part of resource analysis is contracts, a very important part, and contracts represent an agreement frozen in time. What I mean by that is that so many things are variable leading up to an event. The contracts are used to sort of fix aspects of the planning and implementation of the plan leading up to the event itself. Okay, so let's have a look at all of that. So this is the project management process that I've shown you, and we start off again with the missions or goals, or the idea of the event, if you like. And then we have a look at the scope. And don't forget, what we're talking about here, once again, is project management. We're not necessarily talking about the idea of the event itself, it's innovation, etc. So scope, stakeholder management, and the most important part, the WBS, the work breakdown structure. And from that, and this is why I want you to use the work breakdown structure to decide on what resources you need for the event. Okay, you can see down here, resources, and that's part of the procurement. So procurement means getting the resources, getting them there, contracting it, and then getting them back. So it has to do with logistics as well. And we'll talk a bit about logistics later on. So what happens is that you have a look at your work breakdown structure, and you'll find that some things can actually be packaged together. For example, let's say that you have 2 stages in the event, and both of which have a sound system. So rather than getting 2 different sound systems, you put them together. That's called work packaging. And that is then put out to a contractor or a supplier of sound systems. Now, there's a variety of ways of doing that, and I'll talk about that in a sec. But basically, that's called work packaging. So what you're doing is going through your whole work breakdown structure, looking at what resources are needed, and then packaging them together. For example, you could actually get a company to do the stage and the sound system. You may not need 2 different companies to do that. Okay, so once you've got the package together, then you identify who can supply it, okay, and you put it out to request for tender. That's what RFT means there. And if you're working for governments or certain organisations, you may have to get at least 3 tenders, in other words, 3 companies to pitch for the job. Let's say it's supplying the stage. Then you have to compare them together. That's a comparison and the bids, and then decide on which of those companies you're going to use, and then contract. Okay, get a contract together. And of course, the contract will have an input into financial management, which is another part, of course, of the event. All right. Over here, I've got the supplier assessment matrix. In other words, you've got to work out which is the best supplier. That's what it's meant by that. So what are the tools and techniques that are used in this resource analysis? Okay, so don't forget this part of procurement, resource analysis. So it's all derived from the work breakdown structure, and you'll have to decide whether you actually have some of these goods, and some event companies already have sound systems, for example, to use the same example. But there's a lot of other things you'll have to outsource. So the question is whether you outsource it, in which case you have to get companies to supply it, or you insource it, which means you provide it yourself. Then you have to think about buy, hire, or manufacture. It's another decision that you have to make in project management. For example, you could hire the sound system, okay, which is the in most cases what happened, but in some cases, event companies actually buy the sound system. It may be cheaper to buy the sound system and have somewhere to store it in between events. Or you may have to manufacture it, maybe a special type of sound system that you may have to get manufactured. So with every resource is that decision, buy, hire, or manufacture. Now, one of the things you have to decide about is depreciation, because if you're buying something, at the end of the event, you may want to sell it. Okay? And believe it or not, the thing will be worth less. Well, you all know that because you all have phones and you know that you bought your iPhone for a certain amount. And if you try to sell it again, even the next day, it has depreciated by at least 30%. So depreciation is an important concept because these are all financial decisions, you see. Is it better to buy it and sell it at the end, I'd say a stage, or is it better to hire a stage? Another thing you might like to think about is that there are some things at the event that actually are worth more at the end of the event. Now, maybe the sound system won't be, but there's certain things at an event that could be worth more. And you know that from sport, in soccer, or you guys call it football, the jersey of some of the players can be auctioned off after the event, and a jersey that may cost maybe $50 or $100 can maybe auctioned off for $10,000 if it is worn by a famous person in the soccer. Okay, so that's appreciation, and this is important because this can actually earn you money after the event. The big problem with events is this unique and standard resources here. Now, one of the issues with people who don't know about events is they don't realize this difference. If I want to hire a data projector, then that's called the standard resource. You can go around, you can look at lots of data projectors and find the best one that you want and price and all the rest of it. Well, that's really easy. The real thing about events is the unique resources. For example, let's say I had an event, let's say it's a medieval fair, and I want to put a big balloon, let's say an 8-meter balloon over the event itself to show where it's at. And that balloon looks like a knight on a horseback. Now, how much does that cost? Well, you don't really know. So, and that's what makes the event special, these special costs. And they're very, very important. Let's say you want to hire Nicki Minaj. Okay, she's not a standard resource, right? She is a unique resource, and the cost will go up and down according to your event and what she's doing at the time and a variety of other things. Now, that's very important because a lot of people think it's all about standard resources, and the uniqueness of the event is often given by the unique resources. So what I want you to do now is to get your spreadsheet out. And hopefully you have somebody who's in charge of the procurement, the resources in your group. And I want you to put this together. Now, on the A column there, you can see that's the work breakdown structure. Okay, once again, all the time we refer back to that. This is the heart of event management. Then for that work breakdown structure, say administration, what do we need? Well, we need internet access. Okay, now it's obvious that it's not going to be an internal resource. Okay, so we will need to outsource it and we'll have to get a provider. Okay, and you can see with every aspect of the event, you can go through it, whether it's marketing or finance, everything requires resources. So I want you to put this template together. Don't worry about D, E, F, and G for the time being. We don't need this sort of stuff at this point. You don't need it. What we're really doing here is getting you to think about what resources are needed. And this can actually be used as a template for real events when you start doing events. This is a very common template in Excel I know lots and lots of events people who use these sort of things. Okay, so let's create a resource list. Now, from the resource list, you now are going to have a look at, from the ones that are outsourced, you now have to look at companies who are going to supply these things, which means that you'll have to get a contract together. Now, contract management is part of procurement. It's all part of event management. In fact, most project managers used to be called contract managers. And you actually know quite a lot about this. In fact, you know quite a lot about resource analysis, even though you don't use the words, because you have to do it. You know, you have to get resources for the university. You've got to get computers. You've got to get your phone, all kinds of food, you name it, all resources. You also know about contract management, even though you don't think you do. You actually have a contract with your phone, but also you have a contract with the college, meaning that you pay them money and they supply you a service, which is knowledge and the certificate at the end, or the degree at the end. Okay, that's a contract, believe it or not. And it's enforceable by law as well. Okay. So there's the definition of a contract there, as you can see. Now, when you're in the events sector and you're going to be running events, you've got to be very careful with contracts. It can, a mistake with the contract can mean the end of your business in events. So, and there's certain ethical or legal aspects of a contract. You can't misrepresent things in a contract. You can't say, we're going to do this and not do it. You can't use duress or undue influence. You know, you can't pressure people into signing the contract. And these are part of unconscionable conduct. And now you're going to have to look these sort of things up. We can't go into it now, but they're very important. And as I said, contracts. You're already in contracts. You should learn about them. Now, what sort of suppliers do we have to have contracts with? Well, here's a list of the sort. You're going to have to get toilets supplied. If you're doing an outdoor event, a public event, you have to get security. All of these have to do with contracts, and hence the term subcontractors. That's what that means. You have the main contract with the client that you're doing the event for, and then you have subcontractors underneath you that you engage for the event. And you can see there's a lot there. And often you forget that there are some, particularly if you're starting off. Broadcast and media contracts are very, very complex. And by the way, you may think, well, we'll just get a lawyer to do this, but there's no guarantee the lawyer knows what they're talking about either. You really have to make sure that you're overseeing all these sort of things, and you have to have enough knowledge about it. In events, since each event is going to be unique, hence the term event, the lawyer's not going to know about your event. So you must keep a close eye on contracts and lawyers. So to find out what sort of suppliers and contracts, you've only got to look at a picture of any event like this one. This is a boxing event, and you can see all the things at the event have been supplied. Okay, see, they've all been supplied, and all of them require contracts. Okay, and this is not an event that maybe you will ever do. It's a boxing event, but it's the same for every event. So there's a number of other things that have to do with procurement, and they're related to finance. So I'm going to have a little talk about finance. You'll notice on the left-hand side, that column there is the same as the areas of management that I showed you at the start. And it also is very similar to a work breakdown structure. So it's a bit of a hint for you. You may find some of these are the main headings for your work breakdown structure. So there's the procurement thing, and we'll go through some of that, and we'll have a look at the contract. So just as an exercise, I want you to imagine that you're putting on a corporate gig. Let's say it's for 1,000 people. You have tables of this nature. Let's say that they seat 8 people at the table, and you need to get tablecloths for this event. Now you're not going to, you make the decision, you're not going to use your own, you don't have any. You're not going to manufacture them, you're going to hire them. Okay. And if you're going to hire them, it means you have to go to a hire company for tablecloths. Now, you've decided on which company to go with, and you now have to describe the tablecloth, what you want for this event. So I want you to have a think about that and tell me how you would describe the tablecloth. And remember, this is a written contract that you're going to do, your specifications, it's called, product specification. And you've got to be very good at this, because if you make a mistake, you'll get the wrong tablecloth and you won't know until the event. And by then it'll be too late and you'll be in a panic at the event. So the description of a product or service when it comes to project management at events is extremely important. So let's see how you go with that. Okay. The next thing we'll look at is how do you structure contracts? This is the financial structuring of contracts. Now, most of you would think, well, if we're hiring tablecloths, it'll be a fixed price. They'll tell us that it cost $5,000 to get them. Well, it won't be that much, but let's say $2,000 to get them delivered. And it's over a period of 24 hours, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. And most of you think that everything is about fixed price. Well, it isn't. There are different ways to structure a contract. Okay, we'll just go through them. Now, a good way to do it, and you should keep this in mind, is what's called an incentive contract. Okay, so an incentive contract means that you often have a fixed price plus there's an incentive in there. So you might hire a venue, for example, and the venue says it'll cost $10,000 to hire. And you could come back to them and say, look, we'll pay you $8,000, plus we'll pay you $10 per head of people who come into the event. Now, let's say that the event is going to get 300 or 400 people. That means that the venue will make a lot more money if you get a full event. So the venue has an interest in making sure that that event is full. In other words, they get that number of people. When you ask them, who can we market to, they'll help you. Okay? That's the great thing about incentive contracts. You'll actually have everybody working with you. It's a good thing for employees too, obviously, that if the event is a success and everybody's happy, then they get paid more. They get a percentage share of the profit. It's incentive. Fixed price or lump sum, and this is the one you probably think when you're thinking about prices. Okay, so these are the aspects, and I'll put this up on the on our website so that you can have a read of it, because although this won't make a lot of difference to your assignment topic, it'll make a big difference to when you actually get out there and work in events. It's very, very important to understand the structure of pricing. Most people think it's about the amount. It's not about the amount, right? It's about how it's structured. Okay. So I won't go into that in great detail. You can have a read of that later. Cost plus is an interesting contract too. Okay, so what happens here is that let's say that you go to a client and they want you to run their Christmas party. Okay. They're very big, by the way, some of those Christmas parties or end of year parties or whatever you want to call it. You know, if there's something to celebrate, they can be very big, and that's where they invite all their employees plus their families and things like that. So it can be quite a big event. And you say to them, look, and they say, how much is it going to cost? And you say to them, look, how about if we make it that you pay for all the costs? In other words, the client pays for all the costs, like the hire of the venue, all these sort of things. And you pay us 20% or 30% management fee. We'll get it all together and you pay the costs of the event. Now, once again, I can't go into this in too much great detail, but you should have a read of that because it's a very common contract. And the important thing is to find out who has the risk. Okay. If something goes wrong, who has to pay? That's what I mean by the risk. So you can have a look through that. Okay, so we had a look through that. So let's get back to the tablecloths. Okay, so there's three ways to describe any product or service for an event. And like I say to you, you'll be doing this like months out from the event. Okay, months out from the event. Then you'll have to make sure that what arrives at your event is the right thing. Now you'll think, well, we can check up beforehand. Well, you can't because there's 1,000 things that have to come to your event and you won't have time. And if anything goes wrong, and it always does, if anything goes wrong, you'll forget to do it. So it's very, very important that you are able to describe the product or service. And this is the way it's done in project management. First, we have a look at what's called the technical description. Now, let's say I'm hiring a sound system. It's pretty straightforward, the technical description, but it's technical. So if I say, do you want a Sennheiser microphone or a Shure microphone, you probably won't know what I'm talking about. But that's what a technical description is all about. Okay, and you can see there's one. 15 par cans, do you know what they are? 3 lighting trusses. Okay, so you can see a technical description, as I said, is technical, and often you won't know what it's about. And by now you would have met stuff like that because it's very common for people when you buy something, for people to give a technical description and you've got no idea what it means. And often that's quite on purpose. You know, it's like when you buy a computer, they'll give you a technical description of the computer and you've got no idea what all that means. Okay, so you've got to be very careful with the technical description. What does the resource do at the event? What's the job of the resource at the event? And you can see there for lighting. Okay, you want to put this into the specification because the supplier may come up with better ideas. So should allow the catering and the staging person to operate under clear light. Now that's something that's often forgotten. People often think that lighting is all about coloured lighting, but no, it's not. It's also about work light. It's called work light, by the way, because under coloured light, certain coloured objects disappear. We'll talk, maybe if we've got time, we'll talk about that in staging. And you can see that's the function. And the last thing is the performance. How the goods or services actually help the theme of the event, or the theme is probably a better term to do. Okay. So you can see there with regard to the lighting. And you can do this with a band, for example. Let's say that you're hiring a band for a technical description. What do we want? Well, we want a bass player and a rap singer and 3 drummers. Okay. Function. What are they? What's their function at the event? Well, we want them to get the people excited. We want them to, when they start, we'd like just a singer, really quiet singer, maybe a harp player. Then when after dinner, we want them to play, we want them to get the people up dancing. What's the performance? Well, you might suggest the type of songs, you might suggest how it will help with the theme of the event. So now you can't do this with every goods and service, but you must try. Okay. Good, so let's just have a quick look at contracts here. Now, I can't go into these in great detail either because it's a specialist area. But as a masters, you guys are supposed to know this stuff. So when you're people come to an event, not all events, obviously, if you go to for a conference, you may come for the speakers, but the talent is what attracts people to an event. You guys know that through music festivals that you go to. You don't go there for the food. So the talent is what's really a very important part of the event. So there's a lot of things when you're dealing with contracts for talent. Now, one of the things is that if you deal with some agencies, you'll get very thick contracts, and often they will delay the contract. They'll delay signing the contract, and we might have a discussion about that. In fact, I'll ask you now. Let's say that you've got an event in November, and you've hired a well-known singer and band, and they're just not sending the signed contract back. You've sent them a contract, right? You've agreed on everything. Now, the question is, why aren't they sending the signed contract back? All right, it's coming up soon. It's only in a couple of months. How are you going to advertise it? You know? So I'll ask that question of you and see how you go with why. Okay, so what you want from them is the heads of agreement. They're the main parts of the agreement, and they're very similar to the triangle, the project management triangle. It's how much are they going to cost, right? That's the cost part of it. How long are they going to perform for, and how long are they when are they going to arrive and leave? That's the time. And what are they going to do while they're there? That's the quality. Time, cost, quality. I told you that's the basis of just about all negotiation when it comes to events and projects, okay? And that's called the heads of agreement. And basically, you're not overly interested in the thick contract at the beginning. All you want is the heads of agreement, and that's what they call it. And the advantage of that is that the heads of agreement don't necessarily have to go through teams of lawyers or anything like that, but they are an agreement and enforceable by law. A letter of agreement, okay, is also a contract. So one thing that you'll do when you hire talent, and they could be a keynote speaker or a band or dancers, or I've hired the whole lot of those, is you'll get a thing called the rider, and the rider is the hospitality agreement. Okay. They just send it to you, and it could actually cost more than the contract itself. That means the hotel, the type of hotel they want to stay in, the sort of cars they want to drive, the sort of food they want to eat, and all their friends, because sometimes they come with accompanying personnel. And that's a beauty. I hired a group from Réunion Island, and I hired 10 dancers, Sega dancers, and they came with 20 people. Suddenly all my accommodation was doubled. Transport, everything was doubled. Exclusivity. That means you want the person exclusive to your event. You don't want them performing down in the local bar just before your event. And that's what exclusivity means. You just want them for your event. You want to know who you're dealing with. And this is a big problem these days. And you know from Google, actually, that these days Google is now just full of people that are between you and what you want. When Google started out, you got to exactly what you want. Now, if you type in something, you just get a whole lot of websites that are not what you want, but will help you get what you want if you pay for it. And this is quite common in the music industry. You've got to know who to deal with. Basically, you look for the person who has the right to sign the contract. The right to sign the contract, because ultimately that's what's enforceable in law.